Okay, we're back with week 2, man. You're back. It's awesome. I'm excited. Welcome to Light Group. If it's your first time, hey, glad you're here. If you're back again, I see you. You're showing up. This is awesome. But man, if you don't know who I am, I'm Pastor Josh, and man, my wife's just super pregnant. She would love to be in this video, but she's just super pregnant. But all right, I want to dive in. Okay, week 2, we're talking through Ephesians chapter 2. And so, hey, and leaders, I encourage you guys tonight, why don't you guys read this whole chapter? It'll take about 5 minutes. Just read through it tonight, because I would love for you guys to get a full idea of everything. And hey, next week is going to be chapter 3. And so take the time to read it throughout the week a couple times. Come kind of prepared, knowing maybe the scripture a little bit better, and then you'll be able to ask questions, learn even more. Like, it's just an awesome way. But okay, so give you some context, okay? So we're still writing this letter, okay? So we're seeing that the letter is being written. So when they wrote the letter, when Paul wrote this letter, it's not like he wrote it in chapter form. So this is just one long letter. Like, could you imagine being a church that receives this letter? That's like just straight up telling you everything, all up in your business. Okay, it's very honest, very real. Okay, and so I love it. I love how he writes this. Okay, and so at the beginning of this, he really takes some time and he starts talking about, at the beginning of chapter 2, starts talking about he's like referencing the past, like the way that things used to be, the way that we used to act, the way that we used to behave. It's almost like he's like, hey, I want you to remember how things were before you met him. And so he really talks about how the life that we had before, we were controlled by our own thoughts, controlled by our own ambitions, controlled by the devil, controlled by sinful nature, the things that we know that we don't want, but we do. He references this. He's talking about the past. He's talking about the things that we used to be. He says, there's something there's something that happened now that we now understand has changed everything, okay? It's changed everything. And it's grace. It's grace. And his name, it has a name, and his name is Jesus. So Jesus, what he did upon the cross, it took care of everything, okay? So, but grace. Everything, this isn't, but grace changed everything. And so that's the context that we see this in. So now he's referencing this beautiful thing called grace. And he talks about all these different ways of what grace actually looks like in our life. It's not this workspace thing. It's not like you do this, do that, and then you receive grace and then you're loved. It's like, oh, well, if I just feel it enough, then I'll have grace. Or the thing that I've always heard a bunch is like, how do you know that you're good with God? How do you know that you're going to heaven someday? It's like, well, I'm a good person and I've done some good things and I'm good. And it's like, well, the scriptures don't say anything about that. Like, the truth is the scriptures are kind of honest, and they say that you're not good. But what Jesus has done is good enough for you. It is good to take care of any issue, any sin, anything that's going on. That's the difference maker here. And so we see that so very clearly. It's nothing we can do. It's nothing we can earn. It's what he's done. So it's all wrapped up in Jesus. That's what this grace thing really looks like. So it talks about all of these different stuff. And all these verses that are throughout it, oh my gosh, like specifically between verses 4 through 8, it gives the beautiful depiction of it's grace through faith. And then because I've received this amazing grace and love, now I go and I do amazing things for Jesus. I don't go and do things for Jesus hoping that he'll love me and give me this grace. No, I go from there. And so so the first half of this is all of that. Remember where you were and remember what grace has done for you. And this is what it looks like. Grace in your life gives you the power to take on the day, the power to take on the week, the power to take on the month, the power to make a difference, the power to change things, the power to be unoffendable. Oh, I like that series, by the way. That's a little side note. So if you got to get to church because that's been really cool. But I'm gonna take us there a little bit. So if you didn't get a chance to watch, if you weren't at church on Sunday or didn't watch this last week's, like we talked about forgiveness. And we talked about how to truly be unoffendable in 2025. It must start with the foundation of love, but the foundation of love is always wrapped up in if you don't have a forgiven heart that lives on, like if you don't forgive, if you don't operate in forgiveness, it's hard to live unoffendable. And so a heart that walks around offended, it's just. But this is why I'm getting at this. Because I do want us to talk. I want you to spend some time talking about what grace really looks like in your life. But the second part of this chapter, I think just beautifully shows us what grace really, really looks like. What forgiveness really, really looks like. Because the first part of it, he takes the time to say, I want you to remember where you were, remember the grace that you've received, remember the forgiveness that has been given to you. And now I'm going to address something else that's not going to be hard to forgive. So there's two different groups of people, the Jews and the Gentiles. And we see that Paul starts to talk about this, okay? All right, Jews hate Gentiles, Gentiles hate Jews. Like, this is real. Like, talk about offense, talk about struggle, talk about anger. Like, this is beef, man, between these two. And so the Jews believe they're right, all this different stuff. They believe they're right, all this different stuff. But Jesus says, I didn't just come to die for God's people. I didn't just come to die for the Jews. I didn't go to the cross just for Jews. I died for everyone. Every person. So now, what does that look like for you? If Christ has so forgiven you, then it seems like you need to forgive those that are your biggest enemies. Because it's not just you that goes to heaven. It's not just you that can experience this love and this grace that that Jesus died upon the cross for. There's something more to it. It's not just you anymore. The Gentiles get to go too. The Gentiles get to receive this blessing called grace. And so, can't walk around with offense. Can't walk around frustrated. Can't walk around with I'm right. You can't walk around with I'm offended by this, and this. You can't walk around with unforgiveness in your heart. Like, that's the difference maker here. And so the second portion of this just goes, hey, this grace thing, it's not just available to you. It's available to every single person. And so you have to figure out what forgiveness actually looks like and what that actually is in your life, because you're going to have to let some other people into the party. That's the difference. And then, side note, and I'm going to leave. I'm going to end it here. Okay, side note though, Paul is the most walking around understanding what this grace thing really looks like. But also what forgiveness really looks like. Because this same man who now is writing letters to churches to help shift them, change them, move them forward, get them closer to God, get them closer to Jesus and what he's called them to do. This same guy was the guy that literally years previous was murdering Christians because he didn't believe what they believed. And so now he's preaching, teaching. He's going into places where he murdered people. He murdered them. And he's going into this place where, hey, like Paul's coming to speak here and preach in my town. And he killed my brother, or he killed my cousin, or he killed this. But yet they were so honored to have, there was such forgiveness and grace extended for this man because he had a radical life change. And so, so tonight, let's talk about it. Let's talk about what this grace thing really looks like in our life. Men, we try to work for it all the time, but he says it's a free gift. He says it's a free gift. Ladies in the room, come Come on, we think that we can do this and do that and make this happen, and then, oh my gosh, God, did you see me? Did you see me? Jesus, did you see what I did? And it's like, that's not what this is. I love you as is. I see you as is. I love you today. But then also, what does it look like for us to really, now that we've received grace, now that we've seen the ultimate forgiveness, just like Paul had, how do we now extend that type of forgiveness to even the worst offenders, to the worst of them all, to the ones that we have every right to not extend grace to not extend forgiveness to? Not easy topic. Good luck, everyone. Have fun tonight. I love you. Oh, man. I just love Jesus. I love you guys. And yeah, let's talk about this. Let's talk about this. All right. I love you guys. I see you.